knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Yahushua HaMashiach. Even we have believed in Yahushua HaMashiach, that we might be justified by the faith of Mashiach, and not by the works of the law. For by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. But if while we seek to be justified by Mashiach, we ourselves also are found sinners, is therefore Mashiach the minister of sin? God forbid. For if I build again the things which I destroyed, I make myself a transgressor. For I, through the law, am dead to the law, that I might live unto God. I am crucified with Mashiach. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Mashiach liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not frustrate the grace of God. For if righteousness come by the law, then Mashiach is dead in vain. Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ba Racha HaKodash, Called the Pa'arath, Hawad Wahaloyim, Rawatham Yatla, Alahayanawa, Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ba Racha HaKodash. And what I just said in the Lashon Kodash being the ancient Paleo-Hebrew, or in other words, the true biblical Hebrew, for holy tongue or language. And what I just said is, all glory, honor, and praises abundantly and continuously to our power, Yahweh, the true name of our Heavenly Father, who the world ignorantly and incorrectly calls God, in the name of his only begotten Son, our Savior, our Messiah, our Deliverer, Yahushua HaMashiach, who the world ignorantly and incorrectly calls Jesus Christ, in, or in other words, through the Holy Spirit. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and respect to the brothers teaching and pushing this truth out the four corners of the earth. To the hopeful elect, the 144,000 and the 1/3, as well as the rest of the elect, scattered abroad amongst the heathen nations to the four corners of the earth, east, north, south, and west. To you I say, Shalom. This is your brother Ra'ib Tezadakwa coming up at you again, all through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, with another lesson. Yahweh Ratazah, Yahweh willing, is going to be edifying and encouraging for you, Achim, and any Achwath, brothers and any sisters that may be listening and or watching. And the first thing I'm going to say is that this is an in transit, and I am on the road, so if there's any pauses, hesitations, or delays, you know why. And I do appreciate your patience and understanding in that regard, and say Thawada, which is the ancient Paleo-Hebrew for thank you. I say Thawada in advance. All right, then the next thing I'm going to say is that this is an ongoing lesson series. The lesson series that you see on the top of the screen, the lesson in the middle aside, that is this past weekend's live altar teaching. So that one being the exception. The other four all having the same thumbnail and all having the same main title, For God So Loved the World, with differing subtitles, okay? And this tonight is part 42, and we're just going to be picking right back up where we left off in part 41. Now, part 41, the Spirit took it in a different direction. I spent a lot of time in Genesis, and I did not get what I was intending to get, which I will actually no, that was part 40. Part 40, the Spirit took it in another direction. I get a little mixed up, so whatever it was. But I remember I'm always going into other precept passages because the Spirit always gives me more. But recently I've been intending to get Colossians 1, and I think I was going to get that on part 40, but then the Spirit took it in another direction. That's the part I think I went into Genesis a lot. And then, so I came back in part 41 and wrapped that up, the Colossians 1 in part 41, if my memory serves me correctly. And so tonight, we'll be getting what I was going to get before we got into Colossians 1, because that was extra as well. Colossians 1 was not originally on the docket, as they say, but that was dropped in front of me through the Spirit, like, get this first. And so now we're going to be getting back to what we were on, which is breaking down Romans the 9th chapter. And in doing so, we've got sent over to Galatians 3, and that sent us over to Romans 3, and Romans 3 is actually where we're at right now. So just to kind of touch bases, now we're still breaking down, we're still laying down groundwork and the foundation for this lesson series here on part 42 tonight. We're still laying the groundwork and the foundational work, showing which is preparing to make it very plain upon tables, which we've already done many times, because you can't not, especially when you're on part 42. All right, but we're laying the groundwork and the foundational work so that when we get to the part of the lesson series where we just deal directly head on with the topic, which is showing that salvation is only for Israel, it's going to be all downhill. I mean, all downhill. Okay. Really, we've already done it because we can't avoid it. So as we've been laying the groundwork and as we've been doing the foundation, putting in the foundation, as we've been doing that, and we've been getting precepts, obviously, to do that, the scriptures which speak directly to salvation being only for Israel are everywhere, and they're explicit, meaning very clear. And so we're not skipping over those. So even though we're dealing with groundwork and foundational work and building blocks and basics and all that, it's right there, so we get it. And it's been right there a lot. And so we've got it a lot. So really, we're already proved it many times at this point. But the focus right now is just on laying the groundwork. And so as we've been laying the groundwork, I'm going to do a very brief synopsis of the groundwork that we've laid. We've dealt with fear, because you got to deal with fear. People are afraid to acknowledge that salvation is only for Israel. They don't even know that they're afraid of it. So we dealt with the fear by bringing out the truth concerning hell according to the scriptures. And so we dealt with that. We dealt with the biblical doctrine of reincarnation. That was in part 2. We dealt with the definition of words. Oikomene, the Greek words oikomene, cosmos, and aeon. All three entirely different Greek words with entirely different meanings in the English. So we dealt with those, because the Greek word in cosmos is not talking about the whole planet. That would be the Greek word oikomene, and that is not the Greek word in John 3:16. So we dealt with that. Then we dealt with what salvation is, because salvation, when you understand what salvation is, it makes it very, very obvious and plain that salvation is only for Israel. So we dealt with that, and we spent a lot of time on that. And then we finally wrapped up that in part 14. And then in part 15, we got to the final aspect of the groundwork and the foundational work, which is getting into the fact that there are two groups of Gentiles, two groups of foreigners, two groups of strangers, two groups of heathen. And I went to 2 verses to show that. We only needed 1, but I went to 2 because they're both very, very plain. And not only do they show you that there's 2 groups of foreigners, heathen, strangers, and Gentiles, those 4 phrases, or not phrases, those 4 terms being synonymous in this context, not only do they show you that there's 2 groups, but it makes it plain what the other group is. And the other group is obvious, because everybody already knows what the first group is, because that's the only group people acknowledge. That's the only group that people know about, okay? And that would be the natural-born foreigners, the natural-born heathen, the natural-born strangers, the natural-born Gentiles that do not go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Or you could say Jacob for simplicity's sake, okay? And everybody already knows about them. And so if there is indeed 2 groups of Gentiles, heathen, foreigners, and strangers, then who else could the other group be but Israelites? because the only other people on the planet besides natural-born heathen, natural-born foreigners, natural-born strangers, natural-born Gentiles, well, the only other people on the planet are Israelites. So, duh, right? Come on, I mean, right. So, but don't worry, the two verses both make that plain also. And that would be St. John 7:35, and that would also be Matthew 18:17. But I have to add a new one to the list. We discovered another one that is equally just as good, and that would be Genesis. I'm going to get it because I want to work it nice and good into my my mental Rolodex, and that would be Genesis 15 and there it is right there, 13. Okay, and that's why I put it in the bright yellow. Okay, Genesis 15 and 13, and you get the context here. All right, this is talking about the seed of the promise, because Abraham had 8 seeds, 8 sons. Okay, he had Ishmael first, then he had Isaac, and then he had 6 more sons through, I believe his wife's name was Keturah or something along those lines. Okay, he had 6 other sons, but the other sons don't matter. Okay, and that's the reason why in the book of Hebrews, Isaac is referred to as Abraham's only begotten son in the book of Hebrews. And then I think it's chapter 18. Let's see here, my memory serves me correctly. Yes, and you see here that the Most High Yahweh himself is going to refer to Isaac as Abraham's only son. He's going to refer to him as Abraham's. He's going to refer to Isaac as Abraham's only son, although he at least had Ishmael at least. And I don't think that he had the other 6 sons at this point yet. But Ishmael was an older brother. All right, and you see here. No, it's not 18. This is where his birth is promised. So where is that? I wanted to read it to you. Here, there it is. It's 22. Okay. All right. And let's see verse 2. Let's get straight to the point. Going down the road, this is extra. And he said, you can read verse 1, right? And he said that he is referring to the Most High Yahweh. Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac. Okay. And you see how the Most High refers to Isaac as Abraham's only son, although Isaac was a second-born son and Ishmael was still alive. Okay, and again, that also ties directly with the Hebrews, where in there Isaac is referred to as Abraham's only begotten son, because he's the only son that matters. The other sons don't matter, and that includes Ishmael. Although Ishmael was given a blessing, it's just a temporary blessing that pertains to this side. They're still heathen. They're still an entirely separate and different heathen nation. They're not Israelites. They're not partakers of the covenants, the promises, and all of that. Okay? So he was given a blessing and he was only given a blessing. When you read a line upon line, you get the context. I broke this down in a lesson series a few months back. I can't remember what the lesson said. I think it was the lesson series. I can't remember what lesson series. I want to say it was a lesson series going into Aliyah, also pronounced as Aliyah, because her name is indeed a Hebrew word, which means exalted Most High, or something along those lines. I believe it was in that lesson series, but don't quote me on that. But when you look into it and you read the scriptures, the only reason the Most High gave Ishmael that blessing that he gave him is because Abraham felt a lot of love in his heart for Ishmael. And why did Abraham feel a lot of love in his heart for Ishmael? Well, you might say, well, that's because it's his son. Well, yeah, I get that. But really, this is going a little bit more than that, because those others were his sons as well, the other 6. But he just gave them gifts and sent them away. No blessing, just gifts, right? He gave them gifts as his sons and sent them away. And they went away. Only Isaac stayed there and remained with him, because they didn't matter. But the difference with Ishmael, though, is Ishmael was his firstborn son. And so he had Ishmael, and that was his only son for a while, when he had been desiring a son greatly. So when Ishmael came along, he was delighting in Ishmael because he finally had a son, and he was thinking that the blessing would go through Ishmael. But the Most High was like, no, it's not going through Ishmael. It's going to go through a son that Sarah is going to bear you. And so, Abraham was struggling with that a little bit, and he had love for him as his son, and he was his firstborn son, and he had been waiting for a son of his own for a while, and he probably was thinking he wasn't going to have one until the Most High told him he was, right? So for all those reasons, he had strong feelings toward Ishmael as his son, and so for that reason, he asked the Most High to bless Ishmael, and for that reason, because the Most High loves him from Abraham, he did it for Abraham. Now, and that's the reason why. That's it. Now all of this is set up in the spirit by the Most High in the spirit, but that was it when you read it. Okay, and he's referred to, because see, the only son that matters is the son of the promise, which is Isaac. Okay, so let's get back over here. Shalakia, I forgot I did that. Okay, where we go? Come on. All right, so Galatians 2. I opened up with this. So just the I don't think I showed you. I forgot to show you the verse. Let me just like I said, going down the road. Genesis 15, right? This is another verse that goes right along with that St. John 7:35 and that Matthew 18:17. And he said that he is the Most High unto Abram, his name hadn't been changed yet, know of a surety that thy seed, the seed of the promise, okay, the seed that goes through Isaac, but not only through Isaac, also through Jacob, because Esau was rejected, okay, a bastard, all right, and that Zechariah 9:6, he's the bastard referred to in Zechariah 9:6. I'm not going to get it. I'm going down the road. My time is short with these in transits, okay? Know of a surety that thy seed, the seed of a promise, through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, shall be a stranger. So through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, yep. Then Jacob's name was later changed to what? Israel. And all his descendants are what? The nation of Israel. So this seed here is the Israelites. Know of a surety that thy seed, take out thy seed and put in Israelites. Know of a surety that the Israelites shall be a stranger. Two groups, and one of the groups is Israel, okay, in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And this is talking about ancient Egypt, okay, and that's not talking about America, although there are parallels, although you can tie it, right, because it's Ecclesiastes 1:9, Ecclesiastes 3:15, but this is talking about ancient Egypt. It's not talking about America directly, okay, but there are parallels. Ecclesiastes 1:9 and Ecclesiastes 3:15, but this is talking about ancient Egypt. All right, so you can put this right along with that St. John 7:35 and that Matthew 18:17. Okay, two groups of foreigners, heathen, strangers, and Gentiles. One of the groups is Israelites, being referred to as such because they're in a heathen, foreign, strange, Gentile state of mind. So now that brings us to where we're at right now. We're actually in Ephesians 2. In Ephesians 2, sent us over to Romans 9. We broke down the whole chapter of Romans 9, starting at verse 1, going all the way down to the bottom at verse 33. We're actually finishing up with verses 31 through 33 right now. So technically, we've already, we're getting precept passages for them. When we're done with the precept passages, we're going to go back there and just touch on it once more, but it's going to be very brief. When we get done with the precept passages, we're going to be pretty much done, which basically we'll be done with the precept passages when we get done with Ephesians 2, which Ephesians 2 has sent us over to, again, the Romans 9. Slaki, I meant to say, we'll be done with the precept passages. The Ephesians 2 sent us over to Romans 9. We'll be done with that when we get finished with the Galatians 3, is what I meant to say. The Galatians 3, okay? Because the Galatians 3, Romans 9, sent us over to Galatians 3. I'm going to show you the Romans 9. Let's just touch on where we've been and how we're at where we're at right now, and then we're going to continue on. I'm going to touch on that Galatians 2 first, though. All right, so this is Romans 9. We got the whole chapter, and we're down at the last 4 verses, and you see here that the Gentiles that followed not after righteousness, which were Israelites. We already proved this. We proved this. Okay, you got to get the previous parts. We proved that you already understand there's two groups of Gentiles, foreigners, heathens, and strangers. Two groups, right? So anytime you see those terms, you have to make sure you know, all right, which group it's talking about. So we've already proven that these Gentiles here are not the natural born Gentiles. They are Israelites being referred to as Gentiles, okay? Which followed not after righteousness, right? Because they had abandoned the way, they were cut off, okay? Have attained to righteousness, but they got it though. How? How'd that happen? Even the righteousness which is of faith, by faith, that's how, okay? But Israel, in other words, the Israelites that had not abandoned the ways of righteousness, in other words, that remained in the land, continue to keep the laws, commandments, and statutes, continue to observe our heritage and our customs and whatnot. The Israelites that continue to, basically, call themselves Israelites and do all that pertains to being Israelites. Those Israelites, which followed after the law of righteousness, because they continued, have not attained to the law of righteousness. They didn't get it. That's completely and totally backwards and opposite of what you would expect. So how is that? How did that happen? How did it get backwards? Wherefore, because they sought it not by faith. Well, they didn't get it because they didn't seek it through faith. The Gentiles, which are Israelites, which followed not after righteousness, they got it because they got it through faith. And the reason why that is because that's the only way to get it. Okay? But as it were, by the works of the law. You seeking it by the law, you ain't going to get it. For they stumbled at that stumbling stone. That stumbling stone is Yahushua, because when Yahushua's finished work on the cross was done, it's time, actually when he showed up on the scene, it's time to transition from the schoolmaster to the actual teacher, which is faith. Okay, it's time to transition from the substitute teacher to the actual full-fledged bona fide teacher, which is faith. Okay, and that's how. And so that sent us over to Galatians 3. And bear with me one brief moment. Okay, that sent us over to Galatians 3. And if it'll come up, thinking. All right, you know how it is. Took a sweet time. All right, so Galatians 3, right? That brought us over here, and we got a segment here starting at 23, and we got down to 27. We still have 28 and 29 to get, but we got down to 27. But specifically this 23, 4, and 5, and 24 being the essential point. Okay, but before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up unto the faith which should afterwards be revealed. In other words, we were being supervised by the law. Okay, so the law was our substitute teacher. The law was our guardian, as the NLT puts it. Wherefore, the law was our schoolmaster, which would be a substitute teacher, to bring us unto Mashiach, that we might be justified by faith. Yeah, to get us to the point where the Messiah comes, and he's going to fulfill his purpose and finish the work that the Father gave him to get us to that point. The law was never intended, nor was it the purpose of the law to get us justification, to get us to deliverance and salvation through the law. That was not the intent. That was not the purpose. And why not? Because it would never work. Why? Something wrong with the law? Of course not. The law is holy. The law is just. The law is good. The law is perfect. Well, then what's the problem? Us. The problem with getting justification through the law is us. What do you mean, right? We can't do it. It's not possible. We can't do it in these mortal corruptible bodies. There was only one of us that could, and that's Yahushua. Outside of him, none of us can do it. It's not, we fail every time. Give us a trillion times a trillion times a trillion times to do it. We're going to fail a trillion times a trillion times a trillion times a trillion times doing it. We can never do it. Only Yahushua, our champion, our big brother of the biggest sorts, our champion, literally. Only Yahushua, our champion, could do it. Right? So that's the problem with that. That's the problem with the first covenant. But it was set up to be a schoolmaster, a substitute teacher, a guardian. Let me put it another way. The law was our guardian until Mashiach came. It protected us until we could be made right with the Most High through faith. That's it. Okay? To put guardrails up, to put a barrier around, a playpen, so to speak, because we are little ones, and we're supposed to stay in the playpen where it's safe until such time that we come and get picked up by faith, and faith is going to take it from there, right? But after that faith has come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster. Okay, so it's about the faith, right? And so we go over to I forgot to touch on this Galatians 2, right? And that this ties in beautifully. And then we're going to go to Romans 3, and we're going to wrap that up. Yahweh Razah. Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law. You got to keep in mind the warning by the Apostle Peter in 2 Peter 3, 15 and 16. Okay? Because basically his warning is this. I encourage you strongly to go read that if you haven't read that before, or you don't remember what it says. I strongly encourage you to read that. We've covered it multiple times in this lesson series already. We'll cover it more. And when I say cover it, I don't mean me just mentioning it. I mean actually going to it and reading it. Okay? Now, if you include the times that I mention it, it's I won't say almost every lesson, but it's a lot of, it's like however many times I covered it, it's like double or more that I've mentioned it. So basically, to summarize it, the Apostle Peter said that when you're dealing with Paul's epistles, there's a lot of deep, heavy wisdom in the Apostle Paul's epistles, and you got to be very careful when you're in Paul's epistles, because if you're not, you're going to get the wrong idea. You're going to misunderstand. You're going to get all twisted around and turned upside down, and you're going to think the Apostle Paul is saying something that he's not saying. In fact, a lot of the times, you're going to think the Apostle Paul is saying the opposite of what he's saying. He's going to say, go right or you're going to die. Go right to live. And you're going to be like, see, it says right there, go left and you're going to live. Go right, you're going to die. You're going to get it exactly backwards in Paul's epistles. How much more so when it's translated out of its original language into another language? How much doubly more so when the other language that is translated to lost in translation? Okay, so you already lost when you already lost some of the meaning, some of the force, some of the punch when you translated it to another language, point blank period. How much doubly more so when that other language is a very inexact and confusing language, probably I want to say the most confusing and inexact language on the planet. How much doubly or even triply or even quadruply more so? Okay, on top of the warning that was given was in the original languages. Okay, the Greek, right? Because Paul was writing to Greek-speaking Israelites. How much more so when you translate it into another language? And how much doubly or even manifold more so when that other language is English? See? So you got to be because the punishment for getting it all twisted up and turned around and upside down in Paul's epistles is destruction. Okay? Again, read the warning. That's what the Apostle Peter said through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Okay? So, knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, because see, it'd be very easy to go, oh, Paul's just saying, forget about the law don't matter. Okay? And you got the wrong idea, baby. Okay? But by the faith of Yahweh Shah Mashiach, even we have believed in Yahweh Shah Mashiach. And then people don't read. They don't read well. They don't comprehend. They don't understand. They don't pay attention. They just wolf it down. Okay? Because if you're paying attention here, the Apostle Paul put some guardrails up to make sure right here in this passage that you don't get the wrong idea. That you do understand that, wait a minute. Don't just go breaking the law now, willy-nilly now. Okay? And he says it right here. I'm going to read it to you next. Okay? All right? But by the faith of Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, even we have believed in Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, that we might be justified by the faith of Mashiach and not by the works of the law. Yeah, because you got to drive it home. Because see, the temptation is that, and this is the reason why the Israelites of the Gentile variety, or the Gentiles of the Israelite variety, got justification through faith, while the Israelites that were, let's just call them the Gentiles of the Israelite variety, and then you got the Israelites. Both Israelites, but one group is being called Gentiles. So your Gentiles of the Israelite variety, and then you got the Israelites, okay, that are not being called Gentiles, okay? They didn't get it, okay, because they were seeking to get it through the deeds of the law, and that was not the purpose of the law. That was not the intent of the law. It was never going to work because we're incapable of doing it. That's why we need Yahushua. That's why we need a deliverer. That's why we need salvation. That's why that's why part of what salvation is deliverance from these mortal corruptible bodies. Who shall deliver me from this body, this vile body of death? I thank the Most High, Yahweh, through Yahushua and Mashiach. Because that's how we're going to get out. That's how we're going to get the deliverance from these bodies, these mortal corruptible bodies that keep us from keeping the laws, commandments, and statutes and pleasing and loving and serving our Father Yahweh perfectly. We can never do it in these bodies. The only one that was able to do it, strong enough to do it, great enough to do it, is Yahushua. All right? So, but if while we seek to be justified by Mashiach, which that's right, that's good, you're on the right track, we ourselves also are found sinners. What do you mean, Paul? Is therefore Mashiach the minister of sin? So did Mashiach, did Yahushua come to deliver us by putting faith in him and what he's done to the glory of the Father? Did he come for us to put faith in him and get deliverance and salvation that way so that we can just sin all over the place? He says the same thing in the book of Romans, a different way. Okay, did he come so that we can get deliverance through Mashiach by faith? And that means, we can just sin because we got it through faith, so it don't matter anymore? God forbid. He says something very similar at the end of Romans 3. We're going to read it in a minute. But let's look at the NLT. The NLT puts it pretty well. But suppose we seek to be made right with the Most High through faith in Mashiach. That's good. That's right. And then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. In other words, let me put it, what's another way to say you've abandoned the law? The law is done away with. Have you heard that before? The law don't matter. Okay? The law has been nailed to the cross. Okay? You heard all this stupid shit from pagan Christianity? Okay? All right? And then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. Would that mean Mashiach has led us into sin? Absolutely. Let me see here. They getting no. They didn't quite get that right on the NLT. Okay, let me see here. Let me put it the way it's supposed to be, because they were on the right track. It was seeming like they was going to get right, but then they weren't right. So let's read it again. And I'm gonna make alterations to really bring the point out, and you're going to see that it's going to then match the KJV, because the way they have it now, they caught me off guard. I thought they had it right, but it's not in alignment with the KJV. But suppose we seek to be made right with the Most High through faith in Mashiach, and then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law. Would that mean Mashiach has led us into sin? No, that's not quite. That's where they went wrong. So did Mashiach come to lead us into sin? Because if you think that's what you can do, then that really means you think Mashiach came to lead us into lives of sin. Mashiach has come to lead us into sin. He's our minister of sin. That's what you're thinking. That's how you're moving. That's how you're operating. You're acting as if Mashiach is the minister of sin if you think that. And is he the minister of sin? Absolutely not. Okay? I had to use a lot more words, but that's it. Okay? All right? The KJV puts it right. It's just that the NLT puts it in plainer English that you're used to hearing. But the KJV gets it right, though. Okay? Is therefore Mashiach the minister of sin? Did Yahushua come so that he can bring us into lives of sin where it's okay for us to sin because we got faith, we got salvation through faith in him? Is that what he came for? So that we can just sin now? Of course not. God forbid. Don't be ridiculous. Right? All right. For if I build again the things which I destroyed, in other words, by what did he destroy? Trying to seek justification through the deeds of the law. He's destroyed that. Now, if he goes and builds that again by saying, okay, yeah, get justification by faith through Mashiach. All right, good. Now that you got that, you can sin again now. All right. If that's what he's done, then he makes himself a transgressor. All right. He makes himself a transgressor. For I through the law am dead to the law, that I might live unto the Most High. Okay? Let me see here. Let me see. Oh, right. Okay? For I through the law am dead to the law, that I might live unto the Most High. Right? We're dead to the law. Okay? And look, by entering into the death and the burial, and of course, obviously, ultimately the resurrection of Yahushua, okay, being dead and buried with him, and then resurrected to new life in Hamashiach, Yahushua, by doing that, that's the only way to get out from under the law is to die. See? That's why the Apostle Paul says, for I through the law am dead to the law. Because when Yahushua died, we died with him, spiritually speaking. And when he was resurrected to new life, our resurrection was with him again, right? So we have new life in the Mashiach, okay? That I might live unto the Most High. But when we died and we were resurrected to new life in him, now we're no longer bound by sin. We're no longer slaves to sin. You see? That's why he says this next. I am crucified with Mashiach. Yeah, we are dead. We died with a Mashiach. I am crucified with Mashiach. And we didn't have to die. He died for us. But when he died for us. As long as we have faith in what he's done, we're crucified with him. Nevertheless, I live. Okay? Because we didn't have to die with him. And also because when he was resurrected, we resurrected with him as well. Yet not I, but Mashiach liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of the Most High. So we don't have to be subject to sin anymore. Okay? Now, does that mean we can be perfect? No. No, because we're still in these mortal corruptible bodies. We can't be perfect until we're freed from these bodies. That's one of the aspects of which there are three of what salvation is. But it's coming. It's coming. We've been sealed with the Holy Spirit as an earnest, a down payment for the ultimate, for the eventual and certain full redemption. Okay, we are, we've been purchased. Okay, we've been bought, and we are the purchased possession, and the purchased possession is sealed with the Holy Spirit. Okay, and Yahushua Mashiach, he's about to come back and pick up the purchased possession. Okay, and when the purchased possession is picked up, then the redemption, all right, our glorification will be complete. Then we will no longer have to deal with the flesh. All right? Okay? But through the Spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, we can pursue maximum righteousness. In other words, now we have a fighting chance. Okay? Whereas before, no chance. Okay? And what I mean by that is now we have a chance. When sin shows up, there's a way of escape. And we have an opportunity to take that way of escape. Do we always take the way of escape? No, we don't. But we can. But it's there for us. So you see? You understand this now, right? I hope. Okay? And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of the Most High, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not frustrate the grace of the Most High. For if righteousness come by the law, yeah, there's a couple of ways you can do that. But one of the ways is by seeking justification through the law. The other way is by saying, okay, all right, we get it through faith in the Mashiach, but since we get it through faith in the Mashiach, I'm going to abandon the law now. I'm going to say the law don't matter anymore now. I'm going to say there is no law. The law is done away with. Okay? That's the other way. Okay? Both of them, one way you err to the left, one way you err to the right. Both errors, okay, and you're gonna err, and it can ultimately lead to your destruction. Okay, these are no little errors here. Okay, and this point, and the Apostle Paul is about to make that point plain. I do not frustrate the grace of the Most High, for if righteousness come by the law, then Mashiach is dead in vain. You think it is a little error to do something that really ultimately means that Mashiach died for no reason at all? He wasted his time. He went through all that for nothing. You think that would be classified as a little error? Hey, look, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Hey, look, if you transgress in one law, you've broken them all. Hey, look, if you transgress the least of the commandments, and you teach others to do so, you will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:17 through 19, right? But well, look, you see there how something that is least can be very, very significant, very very major. How much more so something that's major right off the rip, right? Major right off the bat. Okay, it is not a light thing at all to say, well, since I'm getting justification through Mashiach, well then the law don't matter anymore. The law is done away with. That is not a light thing at all. That is major, and nor is it a light thing to say, well, I mean, I know Mashiach came and did it, but I still got to do something too, and I got to keep these laws right here, or else I don't think I'm going to get it. I got to keep these laws. Either I got to keep these laws because I don't really think Mashiach, what he did is enough, or I think it's good. I don't think it's enough. I think it's good, but I think I got to add some works to it, or well, I just don't recognize that at all. I just feel like I got to keep this law. And see, that's the mindset that the Israelites were in. Just checking my gas here, and I had to stop and get some gas. So I'm gonna have to pause it. But that's the mindset that the Israelites were in, that were in the land that had continued to keep the laws, commandments, and statutes. Okay, they were so attached to the schoolmaster, the substitute teacher, the guardian, that when the true bona fide legit teacher showed up, they didn't want to transition from the substitute teacher to the true teacher. And therefore they missed the mark. They failed. Okay? Because the substitute teacher was never going to be able to get you all the way to graduation. Graduation being synonymous with deliverance and salvation. Only the true teacher, faith, could do that. Faith in Hamashiach could do that. See? So let me take a break, and then we're going to get into, did I already touch on this? Yeah, the Galatians 3 I did, and I said that 24, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us into Mashiach, that we might be justified by faith, right? And so then we're going to go over to Romans 3, and we're going to, Yaharadazah, finish that up. And then when we finish up Romans 3, we got to get 28 and 29, and then we're going to get into some history, all right? History that you need to know. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break while I pump some gas here. All right, so let's go over to Romans 3 and see if we can finish that up tonight, subject to the Spirit. All right, so Romans 3, and we came here, we started at 19, and we've gotten all the way down, and we're here at 28 through 31. Okay, and you're going to see that when we get to that 31, that's a very, very similar, it's pretty much nothing similar about it. It's pretty much exactly the same idea that the Apostle Paul was making over there in Galatians 2 that we just covered. All right, but we'll get there. Okay, therefore, 28, therefore we conclude. All right, so look, we boil it all down and we come to the nitty gritty. We get to the bottom of the matter. We get to the solution. We get to the point, and the point is this: a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Okay? Justification, salvation, deliverance comes through faith. Ephesians 2:8 and 9. So works don't matter? Not of works. Nope, they don't matter. Wrong. Go to James. Precept must be upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. Okay, through thy precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. It's false to say that the law doesn't matter, works don't matter. Okay, that's false. Okay, through thy precepts I get understand, therefore I hate every false way. Falsehood is not going to lead you to life. Okay, falsehood is not going to lead you to life. It's going to lead you into error. Okay, no liars of the truth. 1 John 2 and 21. Okay. Therefore, we conclude that man is justified by faith and by faith without the deeds of the law. The Apostle James tells you that works without faith is dead. Okay, and we don't keep the law. We don't abandon the law. Clearly, we already gotten that point from Paul, right? And he's about to make that point very strongly in verse 31. Okay, so then why are we keeping the law then? We ain't keeping it to get justification. We're getting that through faith. Then why are we keeping it? To show our Father Yahweh that we love him. If you love me, keep my commandments. to show him that we appreciate his mercy and his grace. We appreciate the great gift that he gave in giving and sacrificing his only begotten son to shed his precious blood for our sins. Okay? To show our Father that we love him, that we appreciate his mercy and his grace, and that we appreciate this opportunity to be reconciled back to him through the shed blood, the precious shed blood of Adonai, our Lord Yahweh Mashiach. Okay? It's about loving him. It's about rehearsing the righteous acts. No, we don't get justification through the deeds of the law. No, we can't keep the law perfectly right now. However, we can rehearse it. We can try. We can do our best. And that also demonstrates our hearts. And the only thing holding us back is this flesh. Okay? And our Father is going to take care of that by sending Yahweh Mashiach to give us deliverance and salvation. And we're going to get this mortal corruptible flesh is going to be dropped, or not really dropped. Let's go with the words in the scriptures. It's going to be changed. We're going to be changed. This mortal is going to put on immortality. This corruptible is going to put on incorruption. So our Father is going to take care of what we can't take care of. But in the meantime, in between time, we striving and reaching to the best of our ability as led by the Spirit. In other words, we're keeping the laws, commandments, and statutes the very best that we can, striving and yearning and reaching to keep the laws, commandments, and statutes the best we can at all times as led by the Spirit. Okay? And understanding that we fall grossly short all the time, for we all offend in many ways. Right? But that's all right, because that's not how we're getting deliverance and salvation. But it's not all right for us to say, well, okay, well then it don't really matter. I don't have to put forth an effort. No, we put forth maximum effort. Or at least that's our desire. At least that's what we're striving for. All right? You got to understand. This is the understanding. All right? Is he the God or power of the Jews, meaning the Israelites that remained in the land, continuing to keep the laws, commandments, and statutes? Is he the God or power of the Jews, the Israelites that remain in the land only? Is he not also of the Gentiles, meaning the Gentiles of the Israelite variety, not the natural born Gentiles? Is he not also of the Gentiles, which are also Israelites? Okay, again, two groups, and we've already established these Gentiles here are Israelites, not the natural born. Yea, yes, of the Gentiles, of the Gentile Israelites also. I put in the word Israelites to make the understanding clear. Okay? Seeing it is one power or God, which shall justify the circumcision, the Israelites that remained in the land, continued to keep the laws, commandments, and statutes, continued our laws, continued our heritage and our customs, I meant to say. Okay? That's the circumcision. Okay? Circumcision. Okay? Seeing it is one God or Father or power, which shall justify the circumcision, the Israelites that remained in the land, by faith. Yeah, that's how they got to get it. Just like the Gentile Israelites, that is, got it by faith. They got to get it by faith. Okay? If they keep trying to kick against the pricks and hit their head against the brick wall trying to get justification through the deeds of the law, it's never going to work. Okay? Never going to work. And uncircumcision. The uncircumcision are the Gentile Israelites through faith. So both the Gentile Israelites and the regular Israelites, let's call them that, get both groups of Israelites get justification through the deeds, not the deeds, I'm about to say it wrong. Both groups of Israelites, the circumcision and the uncircumcision, the Gentile Israelites and the regular Israelites, both groups get justification through faith. The circumcision and the uncircumcision are both Israelites. So keeping that in mind, now that we've established that all Israelites, those that are of the circumcision and the uncircumcision, all Israelites, those that are in the land keeping the laws, commandments, and statutes, and those that are being called Gentiles, all Israelites get justification through faith. Do we then make void of no effect? Do we then make void, moot, pointless, okay, unnecessary, the law through faith? God forbid. Are you crazy? What's the dude talking about right here? Of course not. Okay? God forbid. Yay! We established the law. You got the wrong idea. Have you been listening to anything that I said? Apostle Paul. I'm speaking as Apostle Paul. Haven't you been listening to anything that I've been talking about? Yeah, I've been listening to it, and I thought you were saying that we make the law void now. Man, goodness gracious. Where's Peter at? Okay? To warn you, to pay attention. All right? It can be very difficult to keep up. You need to have the Spirit in Paul's. You need to have the Spirit in all the scriptures. Okay? And you need to study. And you need to have the right teachers. And all of that's pointless unless you're an Israelite by lineage, by heritage, by bloodline, by birth. Pointless then. You got to start with that one. Okay? Okay? Because, see, the Apostle Paul, it wasn't lost on him that you could listen to all the things that he was saying and think that he was meaning for you to throw the law over your shoulder, over your left shoulder, because that would be a left-hand thing to do. It wasn't lost on him that you could possibly get the wrong idea after all that he was just saying about not getting justification due to deeds of the law. So he ended this, well, that wasn't a chapter, so he ended this thought, so to speak, by making it clear that he wasn't saying that. But a lot of times people don't read the whole chapter. They don't read the whole book. They don't read the whole chapter. They read what they want to read and then they stop. Or if they do read it, they don't pay attention to it at all. At all. How many times, it's right there. Do we then make void of none effect? Do away with. What does it mean when you do away with the law? The law is done away with. I've heard that 1,000 times, 10,000 times. The law is done away with. Well, if you do away with the law, doesn't that mean you made it void? Yeah. Right. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Of course not! But that's exactly what pagan Christianity does. And everybody believes it. Everybody swallows it. Hook, line, and sinker. There it is right there. Completely and totally contrary. Now, if the Apostle Paul didn't put that there, then you might, it ain't gonna work. It wouldn't work. You still be guilty. All right? You still be guilty and wrong, but at least you can say, well, it really sounded that way to me. But you can't say that now because verse 31 tells you, don't think I'm saying that, because I'm not. Do we then make void the law through faith? Yeah. No! God forbid. Yea, we establish. To establish the law, look up the word establish. I'm not going to get it. I'm going down the road. It means to set it firm in its place, not to remove it, to fix it and establish it firm in its place, not to do away with it. It's the exact opposite. Through faith in Hamashiach, Yahushai, that's the way we can best keep the laws, commandments, and statutes. We're still not going to do it perfectly, but that's when we can at least make an effort that our Father will look at it and say, they messing it up all kinds of ways, terribly, but you know what? I see their heart, and they're trying, and I'm pleased. Because I'm looking at them through my only begotten Son, Yahushua. So when I look at them through Yahushua, because they put their faith in him, I see their meager efforts, but I'm pleased with it. I'm pleased with it. It's really like he grades us on a curve, so to speak. A massive curve. Whereas if he was looking at us unfiltered, he's looking at us filtered through the lens of Yahushua, right? So he's pleased because we're trying the best we can. But if we that's because we have our faith in Yahushua. But if we didn't have faith in Yahushua and he looked at us unfiltered with no lens of Yahushua between us and him, well, it would be horrible. Okay? Our righteousness is as filthy rags. Okay? The best we can do. Filthy, abominable rags. So do we then make void the law through faith? And if you're talking about you put your faith in the Mashiach, but you casting away the law, you didn't put your faith in the Mashiach. Okay? Because if you really have faith, then it's going to always demonstrate, prove, manifest, validate itself by producing righteous works. And part of the righteous works is going to be, or one category of the righteous works is going to be keeping the laws, commandments, and statutes the best that you can. Okay? Doing it the best you can as led by the Spirit. The other part of it is going to be serving him, doing what he says to do, doing the work. Okay? Helping, ministering, giving, things of that nature. Okay? It is laws, commandments, and statutes, not just laws. Okay? So that would be the other category of works. But true faith in Hamashiach always produces righteous works. So if you throwing out the law, talking about you got faith in Yahweh, you don't have faith in Yahweh. No, you don't. Do we then make void the law through faith? The Most High forbid. Let's get into NLT. Well then, if we emphasize faith, and we do, does this mean that we can forget about the law? Yeah. No, of course not. In fact, it's quite the contrary, quite the opposite. Only when we have faith do we truly fulfill, or in other words, that's when we can best keep the law. Not perfectly still. We'll do that when we get deliverance and salvation. But we're on that track. That's where we're ultimately going to end up. Okay? That's where we're ultimately going to end up. That was another precept that came to mind. We established the law. Right. When you get that Matthew 5:17 through 19, and you look up the word for fulfill, it might even be the same thing here. But it's not fulfill in the fulfill is in the NLT, so it ain't going to give us that. But you look at that word for fulfill in Matthew 5:17 through 19, and it means, one of the definitions has to do with fulfilling the prophecies. In other words, the prophecies of the Old Testament were fulfilled when Yahweh showed up, and that's true. But it also is the other aspect as well, which is to the Most High, Yahweh came to fulfill the law and the prophets. The prophets he came to fulfill by actually fulfilling the prophecies, but the law he came to fulfill. The other definition applies to cause the will of the Most High as made known in the law. To cause the will of the Most High, Yahweh, as made known in the law, to be obeyed as it should be. In other words, when you put your faith in Yahweh, that's when you can best fulfill, obey, keep the law. If you don't do that, you can't keep the law. You can't fulfill the law. And you say, well, what about those in the Old Testament? Well, they were moving and operating in faith. And they were believing the prophecies that were written aforetime about Yahweh. Remember, he came to fulfill the law and the prophets. So no, that still counts. That still counts. Okay? See, so it's always been about faith. Always been about faith. It's just that during the first covenant, the first testament, the first covenant, faith was in the background, so to speak, but the works were in the foreground because the substitute teacher was in control of the class. But when the actual teacher, the main teacher, showed up, faith, well, then the substitute teacher took a back seat. Okay? And that's the new covenant. Okay? Now, we're not in the new covenant yet. It's going to be established shortly when Yahweh shows up. Right? But now faith is in the forefront. And the works. So now we get rid of the works? No. We just read it. Verse 31. So the works is still there, but now the works is in the background. Okay? Both are important. Both are still there. Old Testament, New Testament, they both are there. It's just the substitute teacher was in the foreground. The main teacher was in the background. Now the main teacher is in the foreground, and the substitute teacher is in the background, and that makes sense. Okay. And that's the covenant that's going to be for all eternity. It was always our Father Yahweh's plan for there to be two covenants. Okay, the first covenant, a temporary covenant, under the schoolmaster, the guardian, the substitute teacher. And then the second covenant, the permanent eternal covenant, under the schoolmaster, or at least the schoolmaster gets us to that point. Because once we get into the kingdom of heaven, faith will be ended because everything will be manifested. Let me close on that. 1 Corinthians 13. Okay. Let me see here. Yeah. This is it. I'm trying to make sure. Let me see here. Yeah, there was certain specific wording I was looking for, but I don't see it. But the point's being made. Okay. Let me see where we want to start. Yeah, there was a certain. Let me see if I can find that precept that I wanted to close on. All right, I could not find the precept. I have not basically read it in a while, so I couldn't remember the wording. But the idea is here in 1 Corinthians 13. So we'll just read this, and then I'll wrap it for tonight. Yahweh Ratazah has been edifying. Charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. In other words, they're going to come to a completion. They're going to come to an end. Okay, you have a prophecy, and then it's fulfilled, and then that's it. It's over. Okay, that's what it means by fail. Whether there be prophecies, they shall come to their completion. Okay, let me see here. Yeah, I don't really like the word will become useless. No, it's not becoming useless. It's being fulfilled. When a prophecy is fulfilled, then it's complete and it's done. It's over. Right? It's done. It's over. It's fulfilled. Okay? It doesn't mean fail in the sense that it never gets fulfilled. Okay? So don't get the wrong idea. Let's look at that word fail, because that's not the choice of words that I would use. But this was written in Old English, so maybe the word fail meant something a little bit different back then. To render idle, in other words, it's finished. Okay? So when something's finished, it's idle. It's stopped. It's no longer in motion. Okay? Inactive. Okay? Let me see here. To pass away. Let me see. Yeah, so mostly this definition one would apply. Okay, especially one. Yeah, you gotta pick and choose here, because Esau with his definitions, he does the shotgun method, right? But it means that it's fulfilled. It's no longer an open prophecy. Okay, that's what it means. Charity, love, never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail, come to completion. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. Okay, we don't have all knowledge. Okay, not even close to it. The scriptures is referred to as the little book. Okay, and neither do we have complete detail on how the prophecy is going to be fulfilled, knowing every detail about how it's going to affect each brother, and every detail about what the wicked are going to be doing, and the truth. No, we don't have detail like that. We have only the details that are in the scriptures, and maybe a little bit of detail from dreams and visions and what like that, and whatnot, things like that, and maybe the Spirit leading us in certain ways, right? But generally speaking, we stick into what the Scripture says, and the Scripture is generally not that specific with regards to particular details, right? So we don't have all the play-by-play, blow-by-blow of how the prophecies are going to be fulfilled. Okay? For the most part, we don't have that level of detail. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. That's why we're also witnesses. We prophesy, but then we watch the prophecies get fulfilled. And as the prophecies draw closer, we start to see more detail. And as the prophecies are being fulfilled, all the details are filled in. But it all fits. It's just the missing part, or the missing detail of the picture, the framework that we already saw. We got the framework from the scriptures, and as we see it being fulfilled, all the detail is filled in. And the detail fits perfectly. The detail never contradicts. Okay? But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away with. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly. Yeah, we can't make out all the detail like that. But we can see, but it's not detailed. But then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity. Okay, right now we have what? Faith, hope, and charity. We got all three. These three. Okay, but the greatest of these is charity. Okay, let's look at that charity real quick. Basically, love, agape. Supposed to be that. Yeah, love, right? See what the root word is. Yeah, to love dearly, okay? Agape, the greatest of these is love, okay? Now, the greatest of these is charity. Why? Because that one, see the NLT over there. Let's look at these words here. You got now, which means at this very moment. Okay, it's not talking about forever. Abideth, okay, to remain, abide, in reference to place, okay. All right, so right now, in this time, faith, hope, and love are here. All of these are things, all of these are important in this time. Faith, hope, and love, now. But it's not talking about forever. See, you get over to the NLT, it says these three things will last forever. That's them just taking liberties with the wording that they ought not to take, because that's not what it says. You get the Greek words, it doesn't say anything about forever. Okay, it's talking about now. And now abideth faith, hope, and charity, love. These three, all three are here in this time, important to this time. But the greatest of these is charity. Why? Because in the kingdom of heaven, okay, the time to come, which is nigh at hand, in the kingdom of heaven, faith is not going to be a thing anymore. Why? Well, where is it? Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. Are we going to be hoping for anything in the kingdom of heaven? No, we're going to have it all. We're hoping for it now. That's why faith matters now. We're hoping for it now. It's the substance of things hoped for. So we're not going to be hoping for anything in the kingdom of heaven because we're going to have it. The evidence of things not seen. How are we going to have evidence of things not seen in the kingdom of heaven? Everything will be seen. Everything will be known. Everything will be manifested. There will be no need. There will be no room for faith. How and why do you need to have faith about something that is fully manifested? We need faith now because it's not manifested. That's why faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. In the kingdom of heaven, everything will be seen. Okay? There will be faith is not going to be a thing in the kingdom of heaven. Everything's going to be seen. Okay? We're not going to be hoping for anything. We're going to have it. See? So that's why, and now about a faith, hope, and charity, love, these three, but the greatest of these is charity, because that is the one, that charity, that love, that's the one that's going to remain forever. The faith and the hope, those pertain to now. In the kingdom of heaven, we'll have no need for faith. Everything's going to be seen. Everything's going to be manifested. We'll have no need for hope. We're going to have everything. Why are you going to hope for something you already have? In abundance, through all eternity. No need for hope. No need for faith. Everything's seen. We have everything. The love, though, that remaineth forever. That's why that's the greatest one. Okay? All right, so, the Spirit just brought that up, so I touched on it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. And before I do, I want to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba, Racha HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and respect to the brothers, Salakia, to the brothers teaching, pushing this truth out of the four corners of the earth. Adawan Radazah. My voice is giving up. Yeah, my voice just decided to just quit on me. I don't want to this lesson was edifying and encouraging to you, Achim, and any Achwaf that may be listening and or watching. Ayashme Akwana, Azanyim Lashemai Shemai. Let him who has ears to hear. Kwam Yasharala, Baba Kosha, Abai Baba Aitha, Wakal Adawam. Shalom Lahabacharium, Shalom.